Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hobby Night. I will be your host for today's painting tutorial, for there has been a transgression against the 4 Chaos Gods, and it must be righted. So, for that, we are going to get ourselves the greatest mini of all time, the Chaos Cultist, and we are going to paint him today.
But we're on the same side.
Khorne cares not where the blood flows. Welcome back to Hobby Night. I'm Angela, and today I thought for our troop we would paint a Bloodletter because Khorne needs more skulls. Let's get to it.
The first thing we had to do was prime both the miniature as well as our base in Wraithbone. And I want to talk a little bit about this base because it's a bit unique. So this is from Secret Weapon Miniatures, which is a company that makes a variety of resin bases as well as bits for kit bashing and everything. So if you're interested in those, I would definitely go check them out. But that's where I got this. I picked it up at my friendly local game store, and I thought it would work really cool with this miniature, so I decided to use it. The first thing that we're going to do for it is go ahead and put Skeleton Horde just basically over top everything, not really caring too much if we get any of this color on the ground, because we're going to cover that up with something else later. Now, I will say I should have probably used a bigger brush for this. It would have just made it a lot faster. I don't know why I didn't decide to just grab one. I very much could have, but it is what it is, and we eventually get that Skeleton Horde on each of those lovely little skulls. Next, I'm going to move on to the Bloodletter himself, and we're going to, of course, start with Blood Angel's Red, because what better color to paint him with? And I'm just going to get this over basically everything. The only thing that I'm going to be avoiding specifically with this color is the weapon. I want to basically get everything else. I do think I will avoid the horns, but you'll see what I'm doing with that later, because this originally started as being a pretty simple concept. We're going to throw a couple of colors on here, keep it really simple, and he's going to look pretty good, because contrast, as you can already see with all those little blisters or something on his skin, I'm not really sure what they are, but all those little marks and everything on them, you can see the contrast is picking it up really nicely, so you could do this very simply. But as I went, I'd sort of progressed and added a lot more colors, and I think I get to a really cool result, and it's still pretty easy. But let's show you what I do next with Flesh Terror, actually, is the next color we're going to be using. So Flesh Terror Red, we're going to go ahead and start applying this primarily to his limbs. So on his hands, working up the arms a little bit, and we're also going to use this color on the horns and the spikes to give them sort of a base color for what I'm going to do with them next. So far, I really like the gradient that I've got going on his limbs, but I want to push it even further and also emphasize his horns a bit more. So we're going to take some Black Templar and layer this with a couple of layers, actually, because this Black Templar paint, it didn't quite want to stick, especially to the horns. I don't know if it's just because it's such a thin or small surface area, and so the paint wasn't grabbing on well enough, but it did take a couple of layers to get the level of darkness that I wanted on those points on the very tips of his horns. But overall, I did get it. The spikes look great. We have a fantastic gradation. And now I want to emphasize the fact that he's a fiery demon from hell. I imagine that Khorne's realm is filled with blood, skull, fire, and all of that. So I really want to make him look glowing a bit. So we're going to take Wild Rider Red first and layer that on all those little nubs and blisters that are on his skin, making sure to get them on his arms, his legs, and his head and everything, and also his chest. And then after we're done with that, to make them pop a little bit more, we're gonna do a second layer of a dry brush of Yriel yellow and really make these pop. This is the brightest yellow that I had that I thought would work well, and I with maintaining the saturation levels that I really wanted to get on this miniature because he's very bright and vibrant, and I wanted to maintain that, and I think it worked out pretty well. My little demon's skin is looking great, and I think it's now time to move on to his weapon. And because I've really enjoyed using Runelord brass on some terrain pieces recently, and Khorne's colors tend to go with that brassy color tone, I figured this would work beautifully on his sword blade. So we're going to layer this twice, making sure to thin our paints because the metallics can be a little thick on occasion. And of course we don't want to disappoint Duncan. I wanted to differentiate the hilt from the blade of the weapon, but I didn't want it to be leathers or anything that could potentially catch on fire in Khorne's realm, and so I decided to go with Balthasar's gold as my secondary color, and I think it worked pretty well because they're still that same brassy color tone, but one's a little bit darker than the other, and it blends very, very nicely. Now we're going to go ahead and take our Cryptek Armourshade and apply this to both colors to blend them even further and get a more harmonious look. With the wash dry, I decided I wanted to add a slight dry brush to the blade of the sword just to make it stand out a bit more, and I did that using Canoptek alloy just to enhance the edges and give it a bit more shine. And then I also was looking at the weapon and went, I kind of want the portion that he's actually holding onto to be slightly different from the rest of the hilt, so I took a bit of Nuln oil and applied it just to that region to darken it a smidge more and give it that slight distinction. Now it's time to finish off our base, which is the coolest part in my opinion of this whole painting experience, and that is going to be by using our technical paint, Blood for the Blood God, and applying this basically all over the bottom of the base, and I do this using a little dropper, a pipette actually is I believe what they are technically called, and it just allowed me a bit more control, and I was able to sort of glob paint and then move it around as I wanted, and really get this nice sort of organic flow of this blood moving around this base. Now, the thing that I liked about the Secret Weapon Miniatures bases and why I chose to use this one in particular is because it has a nice beveled edge, which helped me keep all of the paint in place as I was moving along, and I didn't have to worry about too much spillover. I know that I said that I was done with the demon, but then I remembered I wanted to emphasize his teeth a little bit, and using the opaque paints that I got from the Manticore kit that I used in my last video, I went ahead and used the Bone White by Vallejo and applied that to the teeth, just very lightly touching them to get a very hint of the light, but it really helps them stand out against his face. And then I decided to use the pale yellow color that also came with the kit to dot his eyes to give them a very slight separation from the yellow that I use on the rest of his skin. I'm down to the final stage, and normally I don't show this part because it's normally not as important. You just see me putting it down on the base, and gluing it down is not really that big of a deal. But for this one, I thought it was important because one, I wanted to show that I planned where this guy was going to stand before I actually glued him down. And I also made sure to use an appropriate paint or glue rather, that will help hold the miniature down to the texture paint that I'd put down, which is why I used the Zap-A-Gap and say not the Citadel plastic glue, because I wasn't sure it was going to hold 100%. The other thing that I wanted to show doing is I actually did add another layer of the blood for the blood god paint because one, I wanted to make him really look like he was recessed and standing amongst all of that blood, and I wanted to fill in any of the areas once it had dried that had pulled away and maybe shown a little bit too much of the base color beneath. So we're down to our last steps and he is looking great. Let's see the final product. And here he is, our Bloodletter, and I think he came out great. I don't know what you guys think, but I'm very, very happy with him. Now, this is an interesting model for me because he was actually intended to sort of be one of those ones where I kept it really, really simple, kind of slapped some contrast paint on it to go, hey, look, this is super easy. You can do with him what you want very quickly, very easily with very limited colors. And then I decided to go crazy, add a fancy base, do a lot of technically like new things that I either haven't played with before or haven't actually combined. And I'm really, really happy with the result. I still think it was also very, very easy, so I don't think it takes that long to get a whole like squad of Bloodletters done. And I feel like you could apply this technique to a number of the other demons in the Chaos Demon books and everything. So like, you know, Plague Bearers will probably benefit from this very, very well. The Claw ladies from Slaanesh that I'm completely blanking on the names of, those would probably work really well. You could do a really great purple and pink scheme. That would look amazing. I might do that at some point. But overall, I had a blast painting this guy. I think he came out really lovely. I absolutely adore the Secret Weapon Miniatures base that I used. I would highly recommend picking some of those up if you want to put your Chaos Demons on some lovely skull bases. They also have some corpse bases, which is pretty cool actually, so that might be fun for the Nurgle demons. But yeah, I really love this miniature. I think he is fantastic. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. How would you have done it differently? Do you like the techniques that I pulled off? What do you think of that base? And I will see you guys next time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. I'll see you later. Bye guys.